Awesome. So, good evening, everybody. Thanks so much to Code and to Kat for organizing this to have us here tonight. I'm Allyson Bradley, and my partner is Ciaran Federico, and we're here
Hey,
to talk to you. We're here to talk to you about the Neurodiversity Project, which is a show that we produced at Chinguacousy Secondary in 2019, and share with you some of the ways in which this show provided a gateway towards building a more inclusive drama department at Ching.
so during the seminar, we will give you a brief history of the show and how it came to exist. Then we'll look at some of the traditional hegemonic theatrical practices that have limited our ability to be inclusive in theater, and give you some tools that can help you to dismantle these ableist structures and build a more inclusive program for diverse and differently abled students. So, what is the Neurodiversity Project? The Neurodiversity Project is a one-act play that was written and performed by students at Chinguacousy Secondary School in 2018. Our thesis was that brain differences like ADHD and autism are in fact normal variations of the human genome and not conditions that need to be cured or treated, and that these differences impact the way students experience high school.
Oh, skipped over something. So the entire project came about because of a poem. In 2018, my student Sarah Walker, who was in grade 11 at the time, wrote this poem as part of the Critical Thinking Through the Arts Symposium. We were attending the symposium on a drama class field trip, and Sarah was asked to write a poem about her purpose. And this is what she wrote. If you cannot hear it, please say something into your microphone.
Hello class, welcome to grade 9. Why don't you tell us something about yourself?
Hi, my name is Normal. From the time I was born, I was told there must be something wrong with me.
If you don't fit this test, there must be something wrong with you.
I was told I was sick, but none easily explained flu kind of way. Imagine that. Being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and on. So young, so impressionable. To be burned with the shade of centuries of past. Pain that wasn't mine to feel. Forced to wait on a cure. And when I went on to start school, it got worse. I felt the shivers in my spine.
I want to be a part of this.
I want to be a part of this.
I want to be a part of this.
I was different. And everyone could tell. But how could I hide who I was when I saw the world in a way that no one else that I knew did?
I feel like I'm invisible, yet so obvious.
My world was neon bright, sharp and sparkling with a million different things to look at.
I saw words flying off the page. I would cry for no reason.
Noises that no one else cared about had me running from the room, hands clamped over my ears. And taste was the hardest of all. I was the bane of my mother. She could not find something to make that I could tolerate. Soft, chunky, sour, sweet, an explosion of flavors that made me gay. No wonder I had a hard time focusing with the explosion of senses I felt. No wonder I screamed when the class yelled. I was taught that I was wrong. They gave me coping mechanisms and promptly took them away. I was improved. I was told to
Knock it off.
You say you oppose neurodiversity, as if somehow billions of unique personalities on this planet are housed in our ankles and elbows, none are mine. Our brains flash at different intervals, playing with different electricity. Who are you to say that your wiring is superior to mine? And I would have spent the rest of my life believing that had it not been for the actually autistic hashtag. Here were autistic people not hiding, comfortable standing out.
I hope one day to walk free
I hope one day to walk free
without
Hope one day to walk free without care.
My views were prioritized over caregivers. I could finally understand.
I was valid.
There is a reason you flap. There is a reason you scream. There is a reason for each of the ways you are, and it's okay.
I say let's change history.
Everything happens for a reason. You just need to find that reason. I am different and unique.
That's
what makes me who I am.
So, my friend, educational assistant Sean Taylor, who was supporting Sarah on this trip, saw this poem and immediately transcribed it and sent it to me. We had both known Sarah for 3 years, but this was the first time we'd heard her tell this story, and it's an important story. And it made us wonder how many other neurodivergent students had stories like this that needed to be told. Ching has a regional program for students with autism, which Sean was working in at the time. So he and I and Sarah put out an invitation to any students in the program who wanted to create a show that explored what it was like to navigate high school when you are neurodivergent. Our leadership team consisted of myself as director, Ciaran, who was a grade 11 student at the time, as assistant director, and educational assistants Sean Taylor and Adele Palla. Adele and Sean were absolutely indispensable as they were our first connection to many of the students in the ASD regional program, and they were present for every rehearsal and performance to support the students as they created and performed.
So we set out with the intention of casting 12 actors, both neurodivergent and neurotypical, who wanted to tell the stories of how our neurodivergent peers were navigating life at Chinguzi. We auditioned 22 students, who each had to perform a monologue they had written about their first day of high school. After 2 days of auditions, we were so overwhelmed by the beauty of the stories that they had told, we ended up casting all 22 of them. By our final performance in October of 2019, we had a cast of 32 performers, 6 musicians, 2 projection operators, 4 backstage crew, 4 technical crew, as well as 6 teacher supervisors, 2 EAs, and a vice principal, and a partridge in a pear tree. So this scene was created by mashing up some of those initial audition monologues.
On my first day of high school, I remember feeling dread.
Excitement.
Nothing but anxious.
Fun.
Scared. I've done this before. I can do this again. Just walk through those doors and get an education.
Just thinking about new beginnings started a notorious feeling in my stomach.
I stand on my porch, backpack in bag, and lunch bag in hand.
I wait for the bus with my mom and dad. It's the first year that they will not walk me to school.
Friendships are not built on lies. They're built on truth. So if you're with someone and they make you feel like you're not good enough, leave. They're not worth it.
When we finally pull up to the front of the school, I am out of the bus like a rocket.
I stand in front of the brick monolith of a high school.
This is so much bigger than my old school.
I pull open the doors.
And I stop.
The sheer amount of people overwhelms me.
My heart starts pumping. Adrenaline starts racing through my veins.
This isn't World War II, this is high school. You aren't going to die.
Just keep your head down. Don't look up.
And definitely don't make eye contact.
Where do I go?
I got lost almost immediately and started to cry. A new school and I can't figure out where my classes are, or even where the office is.
You're okay.
I'm okay.
Everything is going to be alright. Stay confident and show them how amazing you are.
I always wanted a feeling of rush capability, something to help me move forward, to be part of this big family of students trying to find themselves and their passion.
I have to talk to these people?
Will I survive these 4 crucial and difficult years of my life?
So right from the get-go, the leadership team worked on creating a rehearsal environment that supported the needs of our neurodiverse cast members. We started with collaborative norm setting, where we decided as a group the ways in which we would interact with each other. Some of those norms including respecting people's noise tolerance and touch tolerance. The material we were discussing and researching also had the potential to be triggering. So we set boundaries and developed safe practices for engaging in creative work together and for taking care of our mental health.
I'm used to rehearsing mostly after school and on weekends, but for this show, all of our rehearsals took place at lunch in order to accommodate the busing schedules for our ASD program students. We ran 3 rehearsals a week, but students were only required to attend 2. This meant that every rehearsal we had different individuals present, so we were always mixing and creating with new friends. In order to build a strong ensemble spirit among the cast members, we started the rehearsal process with community building activities like Question of the Day, where Ciaran would ask a getting to know you type question like, what's your favorite flavor of ice cream? And everyone would share their answer. We also did improvisation activities and drama games like Atom and Speed Tableau that helped the kids relax, play, and collaborate together. It was really important to Ciaran, Sean, Adele, and me that the show reflect the authentic lived experiences and stories of the performers. We were able to access some special funding through our Urban High Priority School program to fund a workshop with Rob Kempston, who I'm sure many of you know from his workshops at code conferences on viewpoints and on collective creation. Rob used exercises like letter writing, poetry, and journaling to help the students get their stories down on paper. He gave them structures to help illuminate their narratives and some new tools to stage them creatively.
The cast also did extensive research on the neurodiversity movement, the nature of autism and other neurodivergences, and the ways in which neurodivergence benefits human evolution. A group of 8 cast members volunteered to take the writing created by the cast and mash it up with their research into a script that could be performed. The scenes that were most meaningful were those that sprang directly from students' talents and personal experiences. This scene was definitely one of the highlights of the show, an original rap by Kofi, a grade 9 student with autism.
But I'll leave you with our memories, and memories are where it's at. Boy.
Welcome to a speech about neurodiversity. It's common to see that I have a disability. When I was younger, I had a love for hip-hop. But as I grew older, my bar suddenly dropped. I have autism, it's pretty atypical. Speaking of which, these bars ain't predictable. Been inspired to rap since I was 9, always breakdancing and busting with the rhymes, when all of a sudden, I lost my mind. It was my job to find out why. It was childhood kids for me every time. It was really them committing the real life crime. They got to my head, they inflicted pain. Sooner or later, they invaded my brain. It was a couple of years, feeling the burn. Before you know it, I pushed to unlearn. When I grew up, I found my talent. Father came bolder. Sooner or later, I quit looking up for people's shoulder. My beats were strong, even in the song. Giving up a rhyme, my bars would be as King Kong.
So once we got the script together, which was about 3 months into the creative process, Ciaran and I realized that a traditional rehearsal process wasn't going to work for this show. Traditional Western dramatic practices prioritize realism, that the actor must create an illusion that the audience believes. Ciaran and I decided that illusion wasn't an effective way to tell this story. The show was intended to illuminate our students' unseen experiences, so in Ciaran's words, the medium became the message. We put the modifications and assistive technology that the students used in their daily lives front and center.
So we threw out the notion of memorization and provided the students with scripts they could carry on stage. We adjusted sound and lighting levels to make the space more comfortable for neurodivergent audience members. To support our cast members with sensory issues, costume was limited to a custom-made black t-shirt with no tags and any bottoms and shoes they wanted to wear. For our visual elements, such as the live projections, I incorporated the open dyslexic font, which you've been seeing all night on these slides, and is easier for folks with dyslexia and dysgraphia to read. Performers who need help projecting their voices were given microphones, and Sean and Adele were present on stage for every performance to support performers if they felt anxious. Performers were provided with fidget tools so they could comfortably stim on stage. They even wrote a scene to educate the audience on what stimming is and why it is important to let neurodivergent folks stim.
Check the clock. Breathe. Stim. Teacher. Paper. Breathe. Open. Stim. Breathe.
disabilities and autism, everyone's STEM. They just don't call it that.
Foot tapping, doodling, and meditation are all STEMs neurotypical people do on a daily basis. The only difference is that those STEMs are seen as acceptable in society, while others are seen as weird or quirky.
Well-intentioned adults sometimes stop stimming behaviors because they're afraid the person who is stimming might be ostracized by their peers.
But stimming is how the brain copes with the stimuli of life. However, sometimes we get engaged in harmful stimming that hurts us, like biting our lips, scratching our hands, and pulling out our hair.
We hurt ourselves using these hurtful stims because sometimes we feel like it's our fault that we're angry or upset. We take our emotions out on ourselves.
But it helps to redirect those dangerous stims to different behaviors that mimics them, but that doesn't have to hurt us. Sometimes people who bite their lips can use jewelry.
I like pressure, so I squeeze my hand.
Instead of pulling out my hair, I pull apart my stress ball.
There are so many choices.
We can use fidget spinners and cubes if we need to fill in something in our hands. We can use visual stims like glitter tracks to visually focus on something.
We can chew gum, listen to music, or dance.
We need to be respectful of those who are stimming and understand that this is their way of making sense of their emotions and relieving stress.
I bite my nails.
I tap my feet.
I fiddle with my pencil.
Stimming is okay. It's just how I express my feelings.
I stim during a test, and it helps.
I stim when I'm thinking. It gets my thoughts moving.
We all stim. So deal with it.
I think the most important thing that we did in terms of preparing the performers for the stage was that the students always moved in groups or in pairs. At all times, every student on stage was looking out for everyone else. Because we had such a large cast, we rarely got to rehearse with every actor present. So actors would learn one another's roles and step in when they saw a gap. There was actually one performance where one of our cast members didn't make it on stage right at the start of the show, and even I didn't immediately notice he was missing. The kids were that good at covering each other off.
These accommodations made a huge difference for our performers. They helped build their confidence and made them feel safe on stage. When we faced some difficulty having these accommodations in place for our performance at the National Theatre School Drama Festival, we refused to proceed without them. If we want to hear these critically important stories, we have to make the stage an accessible space for students of all needs and abilities.
So just before we move on to the next section, if you have any questions or anything, you're welcome to just type them in the chat. Unfortunately, I can't see it because I'm screen sharing, but once we finish, we can certainly go back to those questions and we'll have some time to chat at the end. So let's talk about making the stage accessible, because honestly, this is where we had the most difficulty in bringing this show to stage. So Tanisha Samuel, who is a trans disabled Black activist, put it brilliantly when they said, "The work of anti-ableism begins with the radical belief that no body is better than any other body, that divergent bodies do not require fixing or overcoming in order to be considered valid." This is where we need to start as teachers, with the shared understanding that all bodies and brains are valid and necessary presences on stage.
So let's start with the focus on realism. As a teacher or director, we want everyone to go up on stage and fulfill our expectations of what the show should be. And that can be as simple as no scripts on stage or wear black. And right there, we're already creating barriers to access. Most people have been raised on drama that sells an immersive illusion. Theatrical training emphasizes immersing yourself in a role, memorizing lines, and creating a realistic mise-en-scène in which the audience can be transported. People want to go to theater for escapism, to forget their problems.
But that's not what we were doing with the Neurodiversity Project, and I think that it does a disservice to students to teach them that illusion is the be-all and end-all of dramatic arts practice. At its heart, drama is about telling stories, and in a school, teaching traditional dramatic structures and practices needs to take a back seat to validating student voice and experience. So for this show, we worked with the distancing, alienating effect of showing the audience what it takes to make a show like this. The structures that existed to bring the show to stage were as important as the content of the show itself.
So anyone who's brought a student project to the NTS Fest is probably fully aware of how many rules are involved. There are 38 pages, everything from rights and royalties to tech to time limits. There's a lot of requirements that are inherent in participating in a festival that limit the nature of the work that you can bring. Going to the district festival, Allyson talked quite a bit with Laura Moniz, who was the regional festival coordinator, about the accommodations our performers required. She was super supportive, as was the first adjudicator, Autumn Smith. Both of them recognized the unique value of the show and did everything they could to support us. When the Neurodiversity Project was first performed at the NTS Festival district level competition in Chinguzi, it received several awards, including Outstanding Production. Once it became clear that the show was moving on to the regional festival level, Laura even had the regional showcase venue changed to Chinguzi Secondary, as our large cast couldn't be accommodated by the venue they had previously booked. So we were the regional host venue. And being the host venue meant that the festival staff were very present in our rehearsal spaces during the week leading up to the show. This constant presence led to a lot of questions and criticisms about the accommodations we had been granted. Concerns were specifically raised about the number of microphones we were allowed to use to support our voices of our neurodivergent performers. At this point, Allyson was out of commission in the hospital with the flu, so I was the primary contact for festival staff. I nodded along as they expressed concern about the mics and subsequently ignored them. As soon as the show was selected for regionals, Allyson reached out to Aaron Brubaker for assurance that our accommodations would be supported. She was one of the many voices from the festival who went to bat for us.
Some of the resistance to the accommodations undoubtedly came from the fact that the festival staff, and by whom I mean the stage manager, the tech director, and the other theatrical professionals, are not teachers. They're professional theater makers and artists, and they're there to enforce the rules of the festival, which are, of course, based on decades of theatrical best practices. The Neurodiversity Project challenged some of those sacred notions by making assistive technology a visible part of the show. Overall, I think we had a lot of success getting folks to see that the assistive technology actually made the show stronger, but it was an uphill fight for sure. The message we tried to communicate was that by continuing to uphold traditional Western dramatic practices as canon, we are in fact reinforcing structures of oppression that exclude many performers from participating in dramatic arts. The NTS Fest is supposed to celebrate student creativity and dramatic work, and the rules were in fact suppressing voices. I think that in time the right people heard this message, and the show was certainly well received by those with the power to make changes to future festivals.
Beyond what's happening on stage, the backstage environment is also a universe of barriers to participation for neurodivergent students. We had a really hard time finding quiet spaces backstage for our neurodivergent performers to relax and prepare for performance. The Hard House Theater, for example, while a culturally important venue, is riddled with issues that brought additional stress to our performers. It is not accessible to folks with mobility issues, the booth isn't accessible to anyone with the most able bodies, and the backstage area is basically a huge acoustic cave. The staff were really supportive in helping meet the needs of our performers, but they shouldn't have to be. We as theatrical professionals need to start thinking more about how to make our rehearsal and backstage spaces as accessible as we make the house. There are rules that govern the accessibility of public spaces and theaters. Why don't those rules apply to the stage and the backstage space too?
I think that if we truly want to dismantle ableist practices in dramatic arts, we need to start by listening to what neurodivergent, differently abled, and other non-neurotypical folks need in order to participate, and just do it. The first time a student asked if she could use cue cards on stage, my initial reaction was absolutely not, but why not? Is she less of an actor because she can't memorize her lines? Is that all acting is? Memorization? The minute we start questioning why we insist on these practices is the minute we start creating more accessible theatrical spaces. So how do we do it?
The biggest takeaway for us over the course of this project was that there is no single solution, or there's no one change that suddenly allows everyone to participate without barriers. Like the cast itself, the support structure needs to be adaptive all the way through, with changes made not as concessions, but in the name of the most genuine expression of voices possible. The best way to accomplish this is simply to get to know the students. Invite them to come see in-class performances and participate in workshops. Find out what their passions are and figure out how those can be integrated on stage. Let them know they're welcome. From speaking with our cast and crew, it was clear that the show was more than just a performance. It was a place to chat with friends and play games and just hang out, because we focused on making the space somewhere people knew they were welcomed and wanted to be.
This extends to support staff as well. Getting to know the school's spec ed department and building those relationships is crucial to making spaces accessible. We get so busy as drama teachers because we're so often one-person bands doing everything there is to do, but there's a whole building full of people who would love to help. Spec ed teachers are passionate about supporting their students. Listen to them and learn what works. They also are a great way to connect with students' families so that you can get even more support strategies.
Finally, giving representation goes a long way in creating inclusivity. Make use of buttons, flags, t-shirts, posters, anything that allows students to identify with each other and recognize a safe and inclusive space. When you do this, you create spaces where students feel welcomed and safe expressing themselves. And then you can begin to discuss together the individual barriers that need to be dismantled.
I think most teachers know that to have a successful classroom, you need to have strong relationships with your students. The drama studio provides a unique environment for forging those relationships because we focus on creating empathy and learning from each other. So hand out those first day of school info forms and ask questions. Do you identify as autistic or neurodivergent? How can I support you? What triggers you? And really listen to their responses. A few years ago, I had a grade 9 student whose intake form said, "I'm autistic, I hate loud environments, group work, and I don't like a lot of movement in the classroom," in a drama class. But we worked together and with the rest of the class to develop routines that helped her to feel supported. And we found spaces in the building she could retreat to when she needed a quiet moment. By the end of the semester, it was her peers who were advocating for her needs and supporting her when she struggled so that she was able to be really successful. When you ask students what they need and then you do it, they develop trust in you and learn self-advocacy skills that serve them well in every arena of their lives. Little things go a long way.
When you build your community norms, ensure they're inclusive to diverse students. Co-create those norms using strong resources. There's a great website called Facing History, Facing Ourselves that provides some excellent community building resources that aren't based on colonial values, but rather on creating shared values that celebrate our individual identities. Build identity sharing and celebrating practices into your daily teaching. Things like getting to know you Google Slides or games, question of the day, personal narrative sharing, and poetry can give students an opportunity to explore and assert who they are and find common ground with their peers.
Oh, extra slide. Good times. Normalize stimming. I cannot stress this one enough. As the kids say in the Neurodiversity Project, we all stim, so deal with.
Oh, I think we lost her.
Yeah, Allyson, you froze. Ciaran, do you want to take over for a bit and see if she jumps back in?
Sure, I can absolutely. She's running the slides, but I can certainly keep it going. I was always taught that we have to control all gestures and movements on stage because they draw attention, but this is not true. Stop stopping students when they touch their clothes on stage or tap their feet or rock. Encourage them to use fidget tools on stage to calm their nerves. Human body movement is normal, and we all respond to stress differently. What you're seeing is a human expression, and it doesn't take anything away from the sincerity or reality of a performance if the actor is stimming. Also, normalize alternatives to memorizing lines. I know this one is hard. We probably all went through a theater program that encouraged us to show up off book day one, but really, memorizing your lines is not a skill. Scripts on stage do not have to be a big obtrusive thing. Cue cards can be small and not distracting, or you can create a folder or clipboard that looks like it's just part of the show. Remind students that there's a huge difference between I know my lines and I can't memorize them, and I haven't bothered looking at the script. And brainstorm different ways that preparation is shown. Things such as keeping your gaze focused on the audience or your scene partner, not staring directly at the script. Being able to drop a line and pick up, and incorporating the cue cards and scripts into your character's physical choices.
Or like when your screen freezes and your partner just immediately continues the presentation. Normalize accessible design in every element of stagecraft. We talked a bit about the ridiculous nonsense that is backstage space, and accessibility issues are rife in design everywhere. A few years ago, Laura Moniz provided me with some costume plates that feature many different bodies, and I use these now for my costume design unit. I mean, why shouldn't you design a costume for a wheelchair user? It's also useful to consider sensory issues when designing costumes. Encourage your students to think about how certain fabrics feel, not just how they look, and how these sensations might impact an actor.
Set design should promote access, and sound and lighting should respect neurodivergencies. Loud noises and bright lights can be triggering, so give your neurodivergent students sunglasses or earphones to help them cope, and offer relaxed performances when you do your school productions. Normalize assistive technology like microphones for kids who need them, and don't shame them for not being able to project. Normalize service animals or educational assistants on stage or nearby to support your actors. Would Hamlet be less Hamlet-y if he had a service dog? I doubt it. It might even clarify some things.
One of the hardest things I experienced when I started working with neurodivergent students was that I needed to be much more organized. I'm used to working in a very organic fashion, and my autistic students needed clear schedules, timelines, and clear expectations. I ended up asking them to proofread things for me before I released them to the general population, and I still do that when I have autistic students in my classes. That way I catch things that will stress them out at a time when we can deal with them and before they become a bigger issue. Finally, and most importantly, celebrate the strengths of your neurodivergent actors and what they bring to the classroom. Some of my autistic students have been the best stage managers I've ever had because they're super detail-oriented, organized, and love routine. Some have been incredible actors because they're unafraid to be expressive, and once they create a performance, they deliver it exactly the same way every single time. Something brilliant to the table, so focus on these strengths and celebrate them publicly and loudly.
So let's talk a bit about the effect that the Neurodiversity Project had on our school community. It was pretty clear to us all early on that this was a special show. Our time together on stage and off was overwhelmingly joyful and supportive. There were firsts happening all over the place. Some of our cast members had never participated in an extracurricular activity before. Some of the cast and crew, this was their first time on stage. And for some of the parents, this was their first time seeing their child in the spotlight. It was a pretty exciting experience that manifested in many different ways in our school community. So I want to show you a few testimonials from some of our autistic cast members. So this is Angelo. Angelo joined the show in his grade 11 year. He had never, ever joined anything at school before, and he was notorious for refusing to stay after school for even 1 minute for anything. Sean convinced him to start coming to lunchtime rehearsals, and once he started rehearsals, he was a constant presence in the drama room. We had trouble getting him to leave the building at night, and even now we are still in touch. He's now enrolled in his second year at the Toronto Film School.
So about the show, I just want to say it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Well, probably one of the best things that ever happened to me. I don't remember everything that happened to me in my life. So like back then when we did the show, everyone loved it. Then there was another show that got rescheduled. It was a really good show. So we started doing more shows. Then some people started graduating, so we had to like change up the script. There was like, I don't know, at least a dozen iterations of the script. Like Neurodiversity, Neurodiversity 2.0, Neurodiversity, the one we did at the regionals. Our crowning achievement was when we went to the retirement party of, I'm really embarrassed to say I don't remember his name, but we went there and there was like all these like posh people there. We did not the entire play, but like a small segment of it. So yeah, I'd say it was a tough act to follow for life experiences.
The retirement party Angelo referenced was the retirement party for Wayne Fairhead, who had been the festival director for the NTS Fest for 50 years. We were the keynote performance at his retirement. And this is Chad. He also joined the show in grade 11. The first time his folks saw him perform, they both approached us in tears because they had never heard him speak so clearly before. Chad is a brilliant guy who is obsessed with politics, and the show gave him a platform to share his opinions with hundreds of people.
Honorable Doug Ford. As you may or may not be aware, though you probably are, students from across Ontario have voiced major concerns about the scrapping of the 2015 sex ed curriculum.
Yeah, we are.
We believe that we are not doing this because we're brainwashed by SJWs, but rather because we actually have a sense of decency. Woo. We believe that due to the removal of the curriculum, certain students will not respect other people's boundaries, and students will not be able to stand up for themselves. Not to mention rampant transphobic and homophobic bullying that will occur. However, we should be celebrating neurodiversity And the way we do that is by supporting LGBTQ plus students, increasing funding for kids with special needs, and teaching others to set guards in accordance with the Me Too movement, and as well as fund our kids with autism so they can fulfill their true and full potential.
Best wishes!
Sad board.
Sarah, the woman who started it all with her poem, sent this testimonial from Nipissing U, where she is studying to be a primary teacher. The Neurodiversity Project meant a lot to me as an autistic student. Having a play centered around the neurodiverse student experience allowed the neurodivergent students like myself in the cast to feel like our experiences were not only understood, but validated through the play's suggestions for accommodations that would benefit all students. I think what was the most important about the Neurodiversity Project is the sense of community that was built around our shared struggles and the empathy that students had for each other based on their lived experiences. And of course, a little bit more from Kofi, who consistently stole the show. Kofi's rap career is taking off on TikTok, and you can follow him at Neutrally300 if you're interested.
Well, what I'm actually trying to do with my rap, I'm actually trying to inspire people to actually go beyond their limits, like not give up, and even when things get harder, to keep going, because if you just give up, you're not gonna get that far, and actually you're just gonna be paddling back.
The show also did a lot in terms of shifting pedagogy among teachers in our building. Many teachers remarked that it changed their perception of how to teach neurodivergent students. Hearing these students advocate for their needs was massively informative, and I've had hundreds of conversations with staff members about the impact the show had on their classrooms. One of the scenes in the show was called So What Now, and it provided direct suggestions to teachers and admin on how to better support neurodivergent students. Many teachers took these suggestions to heart and implemented them in their classrooms.
We don't need to.
We just need to be understood.
We need to be respected.
We need you. We struggle and we can all use some help.
Just like everyone else.
We have strength.
And we have struggles.
We are
Different in the best way possible.
We just need to be allowed to show that.
We need to be listened to.
We need to feel.
We need to be told we're
Not broken.
We need the same opportunities as everyone else.
Doesn't an even playing field.
Tests by design are meant to push students to their limits. That struggle is often allowed to happen, even for someone considered neurotypical.
For a neurodivergent, even regular classes can be frustrating and hard to participate in.
Choosing where to sit, how to demonstrate what we learned, and a common environment could make the difference for that one kid who's frozen in fear.
Maybe consider some other tests too. Neurodivergent kids are great at thinking outside the box. You never know what wonderful things might come up with given an opening.
I hate the hallways. There's so many people who wave so graceful bodies. They're usually taller than me, and I still can't see. I panic. I just want to push everyone, and it's gotten to the point where I still have to yell, "Move!"
Class transitions are a nightmare. So many people all in a rush to their own important places. The noise, visual stimulation is overwhelming.
Creating staggered transitions or smarter student track design can help clear up what's unneeded congestion and headache.
I hate the fact that in multiple classes I could have multiple things due on the same day. It makes me so stressed out because there's so many things that I can't pick one to focus on. Due dates are frustrating. I know they're a reality of life, but having multiple big projects due at the same time, especially those huge end semester projects, can seem overwhelming. I'm only 16 people. I need help managing all this work.
School is meant to be a place to learn how to be successful adults. Please give me the school and tools I need to learn how to prioritize and how to work efficiently.
It would be so helpful if teachers talk to each other about what is
having a quiet place to decompress when things are becoming too much to handle is another easily implementable strategy.
But most importantly,
we need a friend.
The first major effect of the show on our school community was that the neurodivergent kids in the show were suddenly visible to their peers. The biggest reaction we got to the piece was from other students in the building who were blown away by the stories they were hearing. We heard a lot of empathy. We heard a lot of empathy and a lot of common experiences. The cast became sort of celebrities in the building, and the show definitely encouraged their peers to support them more actively in classes and extracurriculars. It was also massively confidence building for the cast members. From the get-go, the show focused on creating supportive relationships, and the huge success of performance created even more of these relationships, both with other students and with adults who wanted to hear what they had to say and support their voices.
Furthermore, we inspired changes to the National Theatre School Drama Festival. I was asked to join the NTS Fest committee, where I helped revise the rules for future festivals to improve accessibility, and hopefully these changes will result in easier access for future performances like ours. I think a major takeaway from our work on this production is that when we teach kids, we're not prepping them for the professional world. We're teaching kids. The idea that professional is better is inherently oppressive. These students had not been welcomed into the theater community before, and the only reason for that was that they needed accommodations that aren't often seen in live theater, things like mics, cue cards, and support adults. What we learned was that by providing these supports, we were in fact removing barriers to participation and enriching our own practices as creators and storytellers.
I hope that you found this presentation informative and that it's made you think about some of the traditional theatrical practices that you hold dear in a new light. I can honestly say that I never thought I'd be standing in front of a group of drama educators and artists encouraging y'all to tell your students that memorization is not important, but this show really changed my life. Seeing these kids on stage, sharing their critically important stories with the world and breaking whatever barriers they had to in order to do it was transformative, and I wish the same for you.
So we have some time now to take any questions that you might have about the show or about the process. I've also provided our information in case you think of a question later, and I can provide other resources to anyone who's interested if you want to shoot me an email. So thanks so much for listening. So I guess I'll flip it back to you, Kat.
Yeah. So thank you very much. That was really fantastic, and it was such a wonderful show. I really loved seeing the show and seeing the students. So thank you for bringing that here. Jesse brought up a great point here in the chat, asking about how have you negotiated a student's preference not to engage in group work when so much of drama is collaborative and group work based?
Well, I think that the pandemic has provided like a really good opening into that conversation, which is that we spent like a year and a half making everything individualized and online and hybrid and all of these various different formats. Generally, my first approach is to see if I can make a group work, to be like, hey, do you have any friends in the class? Is there anyone you would like to work with? I can make a group and make sure that you're with Kat because I know that you guys get along really well. Or maybe you two would like to work in a pair. I had a group of 4 this semester with 2 neurotypical kids, 1 dyslexic kid and 1 autistic kid. And the 2 special needs girls were both like, we can't work with these people. They talk too much. They're disorganized. I was like, fine, split. You're both still doing the same topic because they were, creating their own work. And I said, you're both still doing the same topic, but you're not working together anymore. And that's fine. Nobody's penalized. You don't lose any of your work. You've already got part of a script, so like take it and work on it. And we ended up with 2 versions of the same scene, which were actually really cool and very different in the direction that they took the work. So I mean, I think it's just about being flexible. Like you're not going to be able to do things the way you've done them before, and you just have to kind of throw yourself into that. I mean, that's what I've been trying to do since we came back to in-person, is just, trying to relax and just let it figure itself out. And sometimes it's great and sometimes it crashes and burns, but like generally everybody comes away with it with a smile on their face, which is nice. Yeah, good question. Yay. And then it was quiet.
I guess one of my questions would be just in the audition process, how do you encourage those students right off the bat to come out, especially in something that's maybe less less of a play like a collective creation and more of a traditional scripted play? How do you encourage getting that diversity in your school in order to, you know, to get them to show up?
Ciaran, do you have any thoughts?
Well, I think it part of it is just because traditional theater is very much built for people who are abled. I think the projects you start have to, from the ground up, need to be built around the people you want to include. So big ensemble pieces are maybe a little bit easier to get people involved with, because there's a lot of smaller roles that aren't necessarily as demanding in a bunch of different capacities, and just making a lot of smaller things to get people in the door to begin with, so that you have a line of communication with these people, with these students, that they know that theater is a place that they're welcome, without having to be committing to standing in front of the entire school in a couple months, and just creating an environment that invites people to realize they enjoy theater before they have to come out to the massive school-wide audition for the school play.
Yeah, I'm thinking of, like, specifically, Kat, when we did Empire of the Magic Beanstalks the first time at Chang, we had students from the DD contained classroom play townspeople, because they came to watch all of our in-class performances. Like, everything I ever did in class, they were there watching, because they're the best audience ever. And they wanted to get involved. And so we were like, okay, well, here's a role with no script. All you have to do is yell down with beanstalks and carry a sign, and we'll teach you the dance steps, and you'll get a really fancy costume. And, like, they came to every rehearsal and they were thrilled to be there. And, like, the neurotypical students were so excited to have them on board. We paired people up, and then it just, like, kind of grew from there. So I think Ciaran's right. I think, like, once you make that space, you'll fill it. You won't have any trouble. Everyone wants to be wanted, right? Oh, Arthur has his hand up. Hi, Arthur!
Oh, you're muted.
I think you're muted. You can just mime. Just use your mime skills. Oh, there you go.
Can you hear me? There we go. Yay. All right, my speakers were plugged in before. I was going to say hi. It's so nice to see you.
You too. It's been a long time.
Yeah, I think it might have been like 2019.
Yeah, I think it was Hard House was the last time I saw you.
Yeah, it was. It was so great to see the presentation. I mean, I saw the show, which was wonderful and amazing, but it's so great to get a sense of the behind the scenes aspects, which I think are like even more important than the final product, because as much as the accommodations are visible, like so much of it was just like a really incredible theatrical performance. And it feels like some of the really big changes are the things that are happening in the rehearsal process. This isn't relating directly to the show. Maybe I'll think of other really great questions, but I sort of tangentially related. I'm wondering what you're working on now, and maybe how this show is continuing to influence what you're working on now for each of you.
Well, Ciaran's a lot busier than I am. What are you working on, Ciaran?
Well, I'm actually in my second year of film school, so it's been a lot of working on film sets and stuff. But even there, like, film sets are maybe a worse offender to accessibility. Especially like a lot of roles on film sets, and even casting on film sets as in the film industry is very, very pedagogical and restricted. And so whenever I have the opportunity, I've certainly been taking some of the things I think we learned from this production, and when have the influence to be able to be like, hey, it would be great if we could, do this on our set, just making sure that people are accounted for and everyone is heard and everyone is able to participate, because film, like theater, is collaborative, and I think it's all art form is the strongest when it's reflective of everyone who views it.
Sure.
And I think that it's just important to make sure that people can make it.
Yeah, I'm like sadly doing nothing. I'm just drowning in hybrid. I've got two sections of drama and a section of regional sci-tech science. So I'm like, yeah, I'm buried. The plan was, because this semester was supposed to be normal, the plan was we were going to do it again because I still have the grade 12s who were grade 10s at the time, grade 9s at the time, I don't even remember. But they're all leaving in June, and it just wasn't. My kids both got like pseudo COVID, and I missed 2 weeks of work, and then there's hybrid, and then there's OSSLT. So I'm not doing anything. But that was the plan, was to kind of come back into it to do it in a new way. We're also working at our school on sort of trying to get the Black identified students more involved in the theater program. We have quite a few who are like lifers, but not as many as I would like. And I think now that most of my work is focused on identity and focused on voice, that's really where I want to go. And I know Ben, who's in the chat. Yeah, thanks, Ben. That just make me feel old all the time. Okay, could you do that? Yeah, I think Ben and I had sort of been hoping to collaborate this year with the Black Student Union, but it just hasn't come together. So, but yeah, I don't think I'll go back to like traditional scripted stuff. I mean, I've never really been that kind of a director anyway. Like even when I was doing traditional scripted stuff, I wasn't doing it the way most people do. So yeah, I'm looking forward to doing more when life gets back on the rails after wave 37 or whenever we finally clear this. I know, I can see Marina's face. I'm like, girl, I'm with you. It's shit.
Even in your classes, you spend a lot of time doing like student written and student voice work. Yeah. Right.
Well, and even working with scripts, like a few years ago, Mary Fraser Hamilton and I had a really good conversation about like how do you incorporate things written by Black artists or that are about Black characters or that are about Asian characters or Indigenous characters when like your whole classroom doesn't look like that at all. And her recommendation was like have them read it, isolate those themes, isolate those characters, and have them write their own stuff. So that's what I've been doing. And I really enjoy it because the kids are finding connections with the stories, but like not acting out the stories, which I think is going to benefit them in the long run, even if they decide to pursue theater. Like they're then able to kind of create their own stuff, which was always what our professors were shouting at us in university, right? Like be able to make your own work. Thanks, Rachel.
I'm so sorry I have to leave. This was a wonder. I got your contact information, and thank you so much for sharing your journey. It's amazing. Oh
my God, I'm so happy. It's so nice to like get to watch it all again.
It made my heart sing. So
good. I'm glad. Thanks for coming.
Evening, everyone. Bye bye.
Everyone's so nice. I miss people.
Well, if there's any other questions, I thought we could kind of go through.
Yeah, I think Marina's got her hand up.
Yeah.
Sorry. Again, I'm just going to echo what others are sharing, that this was really wonderful to share tonight. So thank you. I'm curious though about, and I don't know if this is going to even be something that we have to contend with, but how you would go about balancing mask wearing on stage, and especially with close proximity and students being at different levels of comfort.
Yeah, I don't know.
What goes out?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that's I think there should be a code workshop at the code conference about like, what the hell do we do with masks? I think that's a really important conversation to have. I mean, I'm struggling with that in my own classroom. I've got 25 kids and 5 of them don't wear masks, and my room is like this big, so we have the door open all the time. So it's freezing, like the outside door open. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you're talking about comfort levels, you're talking about sensory issues. Like these are all things that I think conversations are the only way to clear it up, right? To be like, I want you to be in this scene. This is how I want this to go. What are you comfortable with? Where can we accommodate or modify? And I mean, there's so many different kinds of masks, and I think we can all agree that the cloth masks are the worst offenders for like disease. So just I mean, I invested in a whole bunch of the like clear masks so that I could see the kids' faces, and they hate them and will not wear them. So that was like a massive waste of money. So don't do that. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's all going to come out of what people are comfortable with. It's certainly a brave new world. Does anyone else have any good ideas on that subject?
I don't know. I watched a scene this morning with two students who both wore their mask on their chin, with both of them.
Perfect.
And I was like, so this is an interesting costume choice because it wasn't helpful health-wise, and it was a beard. This is what you chose. So I feel like as the situation continues to change, we'll see. But absolutely for sound-wise, you're really running into to blocked voices, which we'll have to see. And
it's gonna be what it is.
For
right?
our show this spring, I have already spoken to the principal about the fact that my budget is going to have to go way up with microphones. So
if you can get them anywhere.
Yeah,
oh my
sure.
God.
Yeah. Anyway, is there if I don't want to cut anyone off, but is there any other questions for Allyson or Ciaran? I want to thank you both for coming and sharing your experience and sharing your learning through this whole project and inspiring us. And I think it's been such a fantastic conversation. And thank you both very, very much for joining us.
No worries. It's just so nice to get to see Ciaran again. Aw, thanks, guys.
Thank you so much for everything. And yeah. We'll hopefully see you again soon and connect again.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you, guys.